This week, we are extending our discussion on types or trauma, and we want to take a deeper dive into what this actually looks like. So we're going to break this down into a series, guys, and I don't know how long it'll take, but however long it takes to talk about this topic and open it up in a way that we can understand and absorb and not just gloss over it. However long that takes is how long this series is going to take. All right. Last week, we left the episode on the note of talking about attachment styles. And we're going to continue talking about that today. And we're going to take the attachment styles one after the other because I feel like trying to talk about all of them at the same time will make this an extremely long video. But also, I would like us to be able to digest the information and take it bit by bit, not have everything thrown at us at the same time. So, we're going to be focusing on the avoidant attachment in today's episode. What it looks like, how it is caused, how it presents in you as an adult, and how it affects your relationships. Stay with me. Let's get into today's episode.
Does she like me? Was that a date or a hang? Is she single? Wait, what are we? Is it too soon to say I love you? Should I call him now or should I just wait? Maybe I should wait. Wait, should I let her go? Why did he just ghost me like that? Wait, can't we work it out? Is he an F-boy? Is she toxic? We hooked up. Why is he saying we're just friends? Let's face it. Relationships are the best thing when they work and a nightmare when they flop. You're recklessly giddy when Cupid's arrow sticks you in the arse and a nervous, pain-filled wreck when he comes to take his love away. There's hardly anyone who cannot relate to the dizzying highs and debilitating lows of relationships. We are naturally wired for connection, so when that's messed with, it can make us feel crazy. Enter Bambazeled. On this show, we help you figure out if you are being bamboozled by your bae. That's it. Nothing else, nothing fancy, just a real, raw, honest to heavens and hopefully helpful take on the best to the worst of relationships and everything on the spectrum in between. No topic is off limits, no situation is too taboo or embarrassing. Give us everything. So, if you're wondering if you're being bamboozled by your bae, don't walk, run here. This is your new home. I am your new bestie, and I've got you. Now, let's figure out if you're being bambazeled.
All right. Hi, hello, beautiful people. How are you doing? Thank you for rocking with your girl. Thank you for tuning in for yet another episode of Bambazeled. I love you for watching. I love you for being here. Thank you to everyone who watches this show, who participates, who shares, all of that good stuff. Thank you so very, very much. All right, we're going to dive right into today's episode. We are talking about the avoidant attachment. We are coming into a space, thankfully, where conversations about the mind, the way you show up in life, is a direct result of the state of mind that you are in. And your state of mind is more often than not wired a certain way based on the experiences that you have had as a child. Now, attachment theory, in simple terms, is basically this. Human beings, we are designed to connect to one another. And attachment theory is a concept that talks about how people connect to one another. And so this theory states that there are 4 major attachment styles. There is the secure attachment style, which is kind of self-explanatory. There is the avoidant attachment style. There is the anxious attachment style, and there is the disorganized or sometimes called fearful attachment style. And today we are going to be focusing on the avoidant attachment style because remember, last week we were talking about how we pick our partners based on the trauma that we have experienced that we haven't healed. And there is no better way to explain or look into that topic than talking about how we attach to our significant others or the people that we do life with. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about the avoidant attachment today. So the avoidant attachment is one of the 4 primary attachment styles. It is characterized by a discomfort with closeness and intimacy, a high level of independence, and a tendency to avoid emotional connection in relationships. All right. So there are certain things that we have to talk about to understand avoidant attaching. And just know that if you're a human being, you fall into one of these 4 categories. You are either an avoidant attacher, an anxious attacher, a disorganized or fearful attacher, or a secure attacher. All right. Okay, so we're going to talk about where this started, what it looks like, its effects in relationships, and if we can get it into this episode, pathways to healing. Let's get into it. Avoidant attachment develops during childhood as a response to caregivers who are consistently emotionally unavailable, insensitive, or rejecting. We will talk about it, but I have to read the stuff that I've researched because we also want to try to be accurate in our descriptions in this show. We don't just want to talk out of our ass, right? So avoidant attachment typically develops during childhood as a response to caregivers who are consistently emotionally unavailable, insensitive, or rejecting. Children that develop an avoidant attachment learn early on in their lives that expressing emotional needs or seeking comfort from their caregivers is futile. In other words, it is useless and it is a fruitless endeavor. And that leads them to become excessively self-reliant and emotionally distant. First of all, let me say, like I think I said last week, that most narcissists were raised by narcissists. Most emotional issues that we have as people, you can probably likely trace the origin of that to one or both of your parents. Because, like we've said many, many times on this show, human beings are mirroring creatures. And for a certain amount of time in your life, your parents are God. Your parents are all. And because they are all, everything about them to you is everything that exists in the world. Which is why it is so important that parents are healthy. Don't run and rush to have children. I'm not saying that you have to be completely 100% healed before you have children. Go ahead, do you. But there is a very, very strong likelihood that the wounds inside of you as a person, they will be transferred to your children if they are not healed and taken care of. Parenthood does not wash away trauma. Like, it's the funny thing. There's something, I was saying I can't remember who it was. We were talking one time and I said, do you think that, we were talking about an old woman that was lying, essentially. An elderly woman who was lying, flat out lying, right? And you're like, oh, she's an old woman, she's old. And I'm like, hold on. Do you think my grandmother cannot lie? If my grandmother was a liar from childhood and she never stopped lying, do you think it was because she became a mother and then her child now had a child and so now she has become a grandmother? Do you honestly think that that is the reason that she will stop the bad behavior? Bad behavior is not something that is washed away by simply because you have gotten married or because you've become a parent or because you've become a pastor. No. Your behavior, your personality traits, the way your mind works, that is something that cannot be undone without self-awareness to even know that there is a problem in the first place. So if my grandmother was a liar, a pathological liar, The fact that she is now a grandmother does not mean in any way that she's going to stop lying and that everything she now says is law and is truth and it cannot be questioned because she's elderly. And I think that this is one of the things that frustrates younger people, is that it feels like once you cross a certain age, you have almost like a hall pass for not being able to do anything wrong. Like, oh, she's an old woman. She can't, if something has gone wrong between an elderly person and a younger person, depending on how old the older person is, it is already assumed that the kid or the younger person is wrong. And even if the younger person is not wrong, in African or Nigerian culture, what happens is even if the older person was wrong, you still have to apologize or you still have to accept a position of, they were wrong, but she's older than you. Which in itself is actually traumatizing, by the way, right? So it's things like this, and I just went off on a tangent. So I was saying, a person doesn't change simply because they have become a parent. They might want to change. They might realize that there is a need for change, but change in and of itself only happens when you actively try to do things differently from the way you've been doing them before. That was what I was saying all of that for. So a child becomes an avoidant attacher when they have primary caregivers, parents, or they're in an environment where there is very little room for emotional expression. Now, I started by saying you can trace the way you behave to one or both parents, good and bad, because that is how we learn, right? It is very likely that for you to become an avoidant, you have been exposed to an avoidant primary caregiver. Because and they were probably exposed to an avoidance and so on and so forth. And I cannot stop talking about generational trauma and generational curses, and how I honestly believe that generational curses is really generational trauma that is passed down from person to person to person, because nobody says, hey, hold on, wait, this way we have been doing things, I know like 10 generations before me have done it this way, but there is clearly something wrong. And I am going to be the person who stops it. I'm going to be the person who tries to do things differently. And then you break the generational curse, which is actually just a consequence of the behavior that you're exhibiting. You sit down and say, oh, the women in our family don't get married, or the men in our family don't get married. Oh, it's a curse, the devil, the devil. You start praying and jumping and shouting and all of those things. Have you thought or sat down to look at your family structure? To look at because I think that there are family systems of behavior. And where the family culture or the culture of the family system is one that is based in love, understanding, acceptance, warmth, emotional openness, vulnerability, you can tell people that came from a home like that. Where the culture of the family system is one that is based on criticism, rejection. Your mother is always mocking you, or is always like yapping at you and nagging at you or nipping at your heels. You can never do anything right enough. It's always just below her expectation or her approval. Your dad is in competition with you. This is if you are a male child, no matter what you've done, he's done it better. If the family culture is one that is steeped in comparison, unhealthy competition, bickering, chaos, you can also tell a person who comes from a family system like that. And so if you come from a family system where the family culture, this is not about your tribe, this is your family's culture, right? Think about it like that. Is one that is based on everything I just talked about, like chaos, fighting, backbiting, loyalty that is based on pain. So I can do the worst thing to you, but you can never talk about it. Never ever tell outsiders. What happens in the family stays in the family, which is a breeding ground for awful abuse. Because if you report, it has been ingrained in your mind that you're being disloyal and you are betraying your family member, but they are not stopping the behavior that is hurting or destroying you. If these kinds of things are the family culture, then we sit down and say nobody in that family is married. And then you ask yourself and you're praying in church, oh God, oh Baba, we are kabashing, oh Lord, break this curse of the devil, break this ancestral curse, break this. Have you asked yourself, the girlfriends that my son has had, or the girlfriends that my brother has had, or the boyfriends that my daughter has had, the boyfriends that my sister has had, the boyfriends I have had if I'm a woman, the girlfriends I have had if I'm a boy, how did I treat them? How did my family treat them? Did this person come into my life and experience love, acceptance, and good things, and they still left? Knowing that, and this is something that I believe, that nobody leaves what is good unless you're damaged. Is it possible that the fact that none of us are married, let us say, is it possible that it is not actually like a curse from the pit of hell or from Satan, and it is more to do with the fact that we are cruel, unkind, cold-hearted, rejecting, unaccepting. We are condescending people. We look down on others. We think we're better than other people. Or there is a culture of narcissism in our family, or there is a culture of making people beg for approval. And so this girl or this guy has come into the house and they are subjected to the same poor treatment where they have to beg for your mother's approval or beg for your father's approval and never get it. And now they have now also joined the train of children in the house that are actually being emotionally abused. And so they leave. And then you sit there and you say, wow, the devil has done it again. The devil has broken up this relationship again. We need to go and break this curse. And I'm saying to you, maybe it's not a curse. When we come to this world, we actually come perfect. We come perfect. We're a blank canvas. And it is the people in our lives, the experiences that we are exposed to, the ones we are held back from. It's everything in our lives that will be the paintbrush or whatever it is that you want to, artistic reference you want to use, that designs what will be on that canvas. I want us to talk about what an avoidant person looks like. Now, don't think parent, because when we think parent, we become defensive. Don't talk about my mother like that. Don't talk about my father like that. My father is perfect. My mother is perfect. Don't talk about... So let us not even say the word parent. Let's just say person, okay? We want to talk about some of the key contributing factors that come into play to create an avoidant attacher. One, inconsistent caregiving. Inconsistent caregiving. What is that? When a caregiver or your caregivers, because they can be multiple, are unpredictably available or unpredictably responsive, children may learn to rely on themselves rather than seeking support from others. What does that mean? What does it mean to be unpredictably available and unpredictably responsive? Excuse me. And unpredictably responsive. Now, we've talked about our parents. When we come to this world, our parents are all, right? They are everything we know, they're everything we see. For I think till we turn 3, I think 3 or 4, the only thing you know as God, as existence, it's your primary caregivers, whoever it is that is giving you care. And in most people's cases, it's their parents. Have you heard statements like, leave him, leave him, leave him, leave him, let him cry? When he's tired of crying, he will stop crying. Leave her, leave her, leave her. When she's tired of crying, she will stop crying. And we say things like that very, very flippantly, and we just continue on with our day. And it's like, when they're tired of crying, they'll stop crying. What is happening with that child's brain is that when I'm hungry and I cry, when I cry, right? Me, I know the reason I'm crying as the child. It can be hunger. It can be like my diaper is full. It can be that I'm distressed in some way. I'm uncomfortable. Something is hurting me. And it can also be that I just need, because human beings were created to what? Connect. The child just needs that human connection at that point. What creates an avoidant? One of the things that creates an avoidant is when you have another avoidant able to be present to feed the child, because to them that is a legitimate need, is present enough to change the child's diaper, because to them that is a legitimate need, is present enough to run and pick the child out of, danger, because to them that is a legitimate need. But that same person is not able to accord the same importance to that child's emotional need for them. It's like, you're not hungry, your diaper isn't full, no, some nothing is hurting you, why are you crying? The person who themselves is disconnected from their emotional body finds it difficult to understand why a child needs them for something emotional. You should need me to feed you. You should need me to, yeah, I can play with you. I can change your diaper. Yes, but that I should just sit down with you and just hold you and just be rocking you and just be rubbing your body. For what? That's essentially what is happening in their brain. And do you recognize that if you're with an avoidant partner, they present in the same way? So it's like, I'll take you out on a date. That's like my job. I mean, we'll have sex. We can do things together. But when all your partner wants to do is just sit down in your emotions, it's like, what the hell are we doing? Why are we talking about my childhood? Why are we talking about mental health? Why are we? They don't want to exist because they cannot, because they were not allowed to connect with the emotional body that we all have. It is locked away from them. And because it is locked away from them, they cannot access that part of themselves, which is the place that we all have to go to connect with another person's emotional body. And that's why they cannot connect emotionally. So inconsistent or unpredictable availability, unpredictable responsiveness is, I cried this morning and mommy ran and picked me up and she gave me food. She gave me food. She changed my diaper. She held my hand. But now I'm crying and mommy is sitting down there and looking at me. So essentially it is, I cannot depend on mommy or daddy or primary caregiver to come to my aid every single time I call for aid. That is what unpredictable availability or unpredictable responsiveness means. Now, sometimes your parent just can't be there. They have to be at work, They have another child they're paying attention to. They might be sick. They might be sleeping, right? But remember, the key thing you have to remember here with attachment styles and even with trauma-based personality development is the chronic or consistency of the behavior. Now, if this is something that happens once, twice, a couple of times, it is unlikely that that's going to cause you to become avoidant. Very unlikely. But if this is the norm, so it becomes that I come to expect that sometimes my needs will be met and sometimes they won't. But my needs need to be met all the time. So what happens in the mind of this child? Because the needs need to be met, the brain says, we're going to find a way to meet these needs. And unfortunately, what it does, that is the beginning of the detachment from the emotional body. The brain says, I'm going to find a way to deal with this distress. We need to have these emotional needs met. They're not being met consistently or reliably. I don't know what to do about them. I can't get rid of the needs because I can't get rid of these needs because we have these needs. Okay, remember your brain's primary function is to keep you alive and alive as long as possible. And one of the ways that it does that is to reduce your stress or distress, because distress is a threat to the longevity or the life of this thing, your body. So the brain says, I can't get rid of the needs. I can't get people to meet my needs consistently. I can't exist feeling this pain. So what are we going to do? I'm going to help this person by disconnecting from this emotional body that seems to not be responded to whenever it's calling out. Remember, cannot escape the fact that my emotional body needs to be attended to. I cannot control the fact that people are not meeting the emotional needs that I have. But I also cannot let this person continue existing in this pain and distress. So what are we going to do? We will separate them from their emotional body. Think about it like having many doors or many rooms in a fantastic home, and then the brain separating you from your emotional body is like stepping out of the room, that is your emotional body, and taking a key and putting it in there and locking it. Now, let me stay within the analogy of the room. Let's say it's a bedroom, right? You call out for your emotional needs to be met. They're ignored. You are rejected. Nobody comes to your aid. You get off the bed. Sitting on the bed is you fully being in touch with, aware of, comfortable with your emotional body. It happened once. No cause for alarm. Happened the second time. You're like, something is wrong here. I'm feeling this pain and it's not lifting. It happens again. You get up, you sit up. You're no longer lying down in the emotional bed. It happens again. You put your legs down from the bed onto the floor. It happens again. You put your feet inside your bedroom slippers. It happens again. You get off the bed. It happens again. You move away from the bed. It happens again. You move further away from the bed. And as long as it keeps happening, you keep moving further and further and further and further and further away until you get to the door of the room that is the emotional body of your existence, of yourself. And it happens, there is going to be one time where it happens and the brain says, okay, we're done with this shit. It comes out of the room, puts the key in the lock and says, this causes this person too much pain. I am going to save them from this pain. And it locks the door. And from that point on, you don't go into that room, because that room, your emotional body, represents distress and pain for you. That is a visual representation of what happens when you are forming or creating an avoidant person. They avoid the pain of unmet emotional needs by disconnecting from the need to have those emotional needs. Does that make sense? Okay. So the first thing was inconsistent caregiving. The second thing that contributes to forming an avoidant person is something called emotional neglect. Caregivers who dismiss or ignore a child's emotional needs can lead the child to suppress their feelings and avoid seeking comfort. This is very much like what we just talked about in point 1. When we talk about neglect, it's a very difficult thing to talk about because, like I said last week, my parents paid my school fees. I wasn't living on the street. They bought me clothes. The ones that were rich, they traveled for summer. They went on vacation. Or you got new clothes, new things when you were coming back to school every new semester or every new term. You guys, in fact, it is even possible that your parent was present enough that you people played video games together, that you people played together, but they were forever emotionally removed from you. You were comfortable and allowed in their presence as long as the things that you were talking about or the state of being you were in was one that was non-emotional. When you're sat with mom and dad, the conversation is never, ever, ever about your state of mind or being. It is about extrinsic things, sometimes superficial things. You guys can gossip about other people, talk about other people, but you can't talk about each other. You can't say, Mommy, I saw you crying the other day. Were you okay? You would immediately see her lock up. I've had cases where people would literally say to you, a parent would say to you, I have people who have said to me, the parent literally said to them, I'm not talking about that, when they were trying to have an emotional conversation with their parent. This happens in many, many homes, especially Nigerian homes, because there is this de-emphasizing emotions. It's like emotional stuff is not valid. It's for Oyinbo people, or you're a softie, or you're a sissy, or you're a baby when you are an emotional person. There's a way that being an emotional person is almost like an insult. It's something that is said derogatorily. It's like a derogatory, like, slur almost, like, oh, you're so emotional. Yeah, we were created by someone who has emotions, and we were created like God. So it's funny to me that we can believe that God has emotions and we human beings that he created shouldn't have them. And when people express their emotions, they are shamed, they are laughed at, they are mocked, they are ridiculed, they are rejected, they are cast aside. People like, go and feel whatever, go and, when you are tired of crying, come back, or they will just leave you alone until you are no longer in that emotional body. And all the while that is happening, you are teaching that person's brain, emotions are not safe. Vulnerability with my emotions are not safe. Whenever I am emotional, I get hurt. And I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to feel pain. So I'm going to stop. Now, the funny thing about the mind is that the fact that your brain has locked you away from your emotional body, it's like saying you locked the door in your house. Does locking the door in that house remove that room from that house? It doesn't. It doesn't take that room out of that house. And everything pertaining to that room, the needs of that room, whatever that room requires, all remains there, just behind a locked door, but it doesn't go away. And that is the thing that avoidant people, and anybody really, people that have difficulties with their personalities and whatever, don't realize that the fact that you are disconnected from yourself does not mean yourself is disconnected from you. It is still there, and it'll still show up. So yeah, emotional neglect it's things like we can do everything but the mushy stuff. Like when you see people who have to run and hide to cry, it is indicative that this person has grown up in an environment where they were ashamed for crying. Crying is one of the most natural things that a human being can do. We come out of the womb crying. We come into this world crying. Our debut here is crying. And you ask yourself, at what point did we learn to be ashamed of crying? At what point did we learn that crying is a shameful thing or a weak thing or something that only babies do? You learn that as a child when you cried, you had a parent who could not emotionally connect with your pain and therefore blamed you for crying. They shamed you for crying. They tell you things like, come on, grow up. Why are you crying? Are you a baby? Is it only babies that cry? Or cry baby? Cry, cry baby. Baby shame. How does that song go? And so many people grew up being taunted by cry, cry baby. Why don't I remember it? Shame. The literal word that ends that taunt is shame. And you ask yourself, why do I feel ashamed to cry? Have you noticed? Even the healthy ones amongst us, when you cry in public, even when you cry with your partner in your house, as long as there's another person there to witness it, the first thing you say is, I'm sorry. And you try to flick the tears back into your eyes. You apologize for crying. What you're actually doing is apologizing for feeling, because whenever you felt, you were shamed. And so now feelings for you are associated with shame. But we cannot get rid of the fact that we have feelings. And so you are living in a perpetual state of shame whenever your feelings come up, because they will come up, they must. And you are forever running away from that shame, because shame is a distressing, is a distressing way to feel. So you grow up and you become an adult that was a child who had to listen to cry, cry baby, baby something shame. So, and now you have the feeling, you have the emotion, but it is behind a locked door. And those emotions, the way you are growing, they were growing. So the fact that you have gone through life suppressing, it comes up, you push it down. It comes up, you push it down. You push it down with distractions. You push it down with alcohol. You push it down with having sex, having sex all over the place. You push it down with buying stuff. You push it down with having to be the best at everything. You push it down with degrees. You push it down with anger, with rage. You push it down. It comes, you push it. 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 The time will come where that door that is locked, this thing, these emotions that you have pressed down, one day they will erupt. You will not be able to press anymore, because there is only so much capacity that room has. There is only so much you can press down before it goes. So when a child comes to you and says, I feel sad, if you're an avoidant or otherwise unhealthy parent or caregiver, your response to them is not, why do you feel sad? Did something happen? What did you contribute to this thing happening? How can I help you? Your response is, come on, my friend. What is I'm feeling sad? Or your response is, you're on your phone. Sorry, baby. Oh, sorry, sweetie. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Oh, sorry, my love. Your response is irritation. Like, you're saying you're sad. You are sad. You are living in the house. You're not paying rent. You're not paying bills. You're not paying school fees. You're not putting food in the house. And you're sitting down. You're saying you're sad. You are sad. Wait, don't worry. You will soon know what it means to be sad. Or, sweetheart, don't be sad. Don't you know that there are children out there who don't have a home to live in? Don't you know that there are children out there who don't eat the food that you eat? How can you be saying you're sad? How can you be saying you're sad? You're supposed to be saying, thank you, Jesus. It's because it's usually Christian parents that do it. Thank you, Jesus, for giving me everything you've given me. I have no reason to be sad. You haven't found out why that child said they're sad. And so they have come to you with their emotional body, and you have neglected it and elected instead maybe something more logical, more pragmatic, like talking about school fees and house rent, like yelling at them, like ignoring them, like guilt tripping them with religion and saying God will be angry with them. God doesn't like children that are ungrateful. And all they came to you to say was, I'm sad. And so they learn my feelings are not valid. And if they are not valid, then what am I having them for? So when the feelings come up, instead of them to just be able to feel those feelings, they now have to start fighting the feelings. Because it has been ingrained in their mind that you really don't need to have these feelings. Or you are wrong for having these feelings. Or something is wrong with you for having these feelings. Or you are ungrateful for having these feelings. Or you are an irritant for having these feelings. You are a source of distress for mommy or daddy for having these feelings. And that's where the suppression starts. You can have an adult, has an amazing job, make a lot of money, they have friends, whatever, what have you. But if you get to talk to their friends or talk to or maybe talk to their colleagues or whatever, you will find that people know this person, but people don't feel this person. They know you, they know what you look like, they know what your voice sounds like, they know the impact you have in the office or the impact you have in their home or in their friendship or whatever. But they haven't ever felt the essence of this person. And that's because that person is detached from themselves as well. And every time they want to connect or go back to that room, it's like, let me go in there. And it's like, no, but it's so painful. And this happens on a very subconscious level. You don't even know it's happening. And so they take a step towards opening that room, the room of their emotional body. The brain remembers the pain and they say, no, I'm not going to do that. And they step away. And what is happening on the outside is you have someone who shuts down when emotional things come up. You have someone who gets angry when emotional things come up. You have someone who lashes out when emotional things come up. You have someone who disappears when emotional things come up. You have someone who literally will abandon everything, abandon ship. Because they were walking towards the door, they remembered, inside this room, the only thing I've experienced inside this room is pain, is rejection. Nobody comes when I cry in that room. So guess what? We're not going there. Even if we need to, we're going to find another way to meet our needs. And so, you know what happens? I pick up my credit card, I pick up my debit card, and I go shopping instead. My partner is trying to talk to me to tell me, babe, Annie, I miss you. I miss you. And the only thing I can think of is, oh my God, which kind of conversation? What is this one again? Which one is I miss you? Maybe I'm here in the same house with you. And he's saying, I can't feel you. You're here, but you're not. And for some people, they do this knowingly. They knowingly withdraw their emotional selves from people because it makes people need them and want that part of them more. And that way they can control how they release it to you in drops or in breadcrumbs, so that you can be like someone who's in the desert and you get a drop of water and you lap it up. Oh God, I just finally got a drop of water. Some people, unfortunately, are cruel enough to do that. Some others don't even know. They just know that they feel irritated when all these lovey, all these, can you see what I'm doing? It's like, oh, don't be touching me. Oh. What they're expressing is avoidance of emotional connection to you or with you, because there is no emotional representative within them to show up to that meeting where they will have to emotionally connect with you. Number 3, another key factor that contributes to forming an avoidant person is an overemphasis on independence. This one is one of the most insidious ones because it's a bad thing that hides behind a good thing. Let me explain what I mean. Everyone should have a measure of independence, an ability to stand on your own 2 feet. That is a marker of growth and maturity, right? So that is the good thing. Now let me tell you the bad thing that is hiding behind this good thing, and therefore makes it a lot harder to spot and a lot harder to fish out. Even though we are all supposed to be able to mature enough to be independent, autonomous beings, it does not happen immediately. There is a time in which that happens. And if it is forced upon you before the time where biologically, psychologically you are ready for that, it breaks something inside of your head. It breaks the part of your mind that is supposed to rely on people. So if you are not able to rely on your parents or your primary caregivers, you're falling down. They are looking at you. You're struggling. They are looking at you. You have a problem that you cannot solve. You take it to mom or dad, and they tell you to get the hell out, or they tell you, go and figure it out. Figure it out. Before you are able to do so, before they have instilled the tools in your brain that will help you do this on your own, because they have done it for you already. So you can learn from them doing it for you how to do it for yourself. With avoidant parents and with avoidant kids, the parent never shows them how to do it. The child literally has to figure it out from scratch on their own. And that is terrible for a kid. We are adults, there are days when we're in this world and we're like, I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. Like, what is this life? And what is happening? We still get confused. with all our life experience, with however many decades you have lived on this planet, it is still foreign to you in certain ways, then it is a child who has not been here for 6 months. It's a child who has not been here, who has only been here for 2 years. A child who has only been here for 5 years that is supposed to know what they're doing. Know it enough that you don't have to help them. Know it enough that you don't have to step in and show them. And what parents who do this think is, it's tough love. I'm making this child strong. You are forcing the child's brain to develop at a pace that it was not designed to develop. And so what will happen is it will develop, but maladaptively so. And so where a child is supposed to learn when to rely on themselves and when to rely on others, the maladaptation I'm talking about is they will only learn to rely on themselves, not others. And the bad part about that is in life, you can never, ever, ever solve all your problems by yourself. You can't solve all your problems by yourself. You can't live life by yourself. You need someone to celebrate with you when you're happy. You need someone to be with you when you're sad. You need someone to understand you and understand what is happening with you. But if you have learned that the only person you can rely on is yourself, and it sounds like this when people say things like, every man for himself, or in this life, nobody's coming to save you. Believe me, there are people who don't have that disposition. They will tell you, I believe that I can make my life work if I put my mind to it. But I also know that I have a system that supports me if I happen to fall or if I need help. And I will be able to rely on them and reach out to them when I do. I have to stop here and give a shout out. And I know these boys are not going to probably watch this episode to the end because they are boys. They are men. They're older than me. But we've known each other since like forever. And recently, 2 of them came through for me in a way that blew my mind. There was something that I was struggling with. And I didn't want to tell anyone. I didn't want to talk about it. I was like, I'm not. And guess what? When it got to a point where my back was against the wall, I had to talk about it. I reached out to them. And the day I reached out to them, these men said, Annie, we've got you. We've got you. If I call their names now, I don't know if they're going to want me to call their names. So that is what it looks like when you develop a healthy sense of reliance and independence. Independence is also interdependence. And I know when to depend on me, and I know when to depend on others. And being able to do both is what is balance. But with avoidance, this part where they have to depend on others is grossly underdeveloped. You find people who have this avoidant thing where it's so hard for them to ask for help. When you are praised, or you get the better side of your parent or your primary caregiver when you don't disturb them with your problems. So you essentially figured it out yourself. So you get them in a good mood, they're in a better mood, they are more responsive to you, they don't really care how you sorted it out, but you sorted it out and you didn't disturb me with your problem. That is what emphasizing on overdependence, or an overemphasis, on independence looks like. When you try to depend on them, it is discouraged with things like, guilting them. You don't know how hard I'm working to pay your school fees. You don't know how hard I'm working to pay your school fees. And so this child has like a school project and they need money for the school project. And they come to you to ask for money for the school project. And they are met with, how much money am I spending on this, your school, safe? And the next time that child has a school project, do you think they're going to come and meet you, mom or dad? No. They're going to start thinking, how do I get this money to do this school project? A small child that has no business thinking about that. Their options are, how do I get this money to go and do this school project so I'm not left out from what is going on with my peers, or I'm left out from what's going on with my peers because my parents will snap at me if I tell them I need extra textbooks, or my parents will shout at me if I tell them I need money for this field trip. They will shout at me, they will cry and say, oh, you don't know, we don't have money. They will essentially transfer their frustration onto me. And it now feels to me as the child that it is that my request, that thing I'm trying to depend on them for. And this is not just about money, that's just an example. That is causing the parent's problem. So if I didn't come to them with this need, they wouldn't be feeling this frustrated. That's the way a child thinks. They're not thinking, mommy and daddy, they have their own life. Their frustration is their own. It's not my own. Children take on their parents' feelings. And it is the parent's responsibility to call the child and say, listen, you're not responsible for mommy's feelings. You're not responsible for daddy's feelings. I am responsible for my own feelings. And that is how you teach the child to be responsible for their own feelings. But when mommy or daddy transfers their feelings to their child, makes their child take responsibility for the parent's feelings, then what does that child become as an adult? The kind of person who makes other people take responsibility for their own feelings, their own behavior. So I lashed out at you in a rage, but it was because they never learned to be able to say, this is my feeling. This is what it is. This is what caused it. This is what I'm going to do about it. I take responsibility. No, they didn't learn that because their parent never did that. Their parent made them, the child, responsible. And so that child's going to become an adult that makes everybody else responsible for their feelings, everybody else responsible for their frustrations, everybody else responsible for all the bad stuff that happens in their life. So, I'm going to stop at these 3 things. And I'm going to recap to say these are some of the factors, the key factors that create an avoidant person. When there is inconsistent caregiving in the home, so sometimes there is care, other times there isn't. Sometimes there is care, other times there is cruelty. 2, when there is emotional neglect. So I am present for every other part of you except the emotional part of you. Your emotions are not my business. Your crying is not my business. In fact, it is an irritant to me. It is a source of frustration to me. It is a source of distress to me. Please don't bring all this heart stuff. Bring head stuff to me. We can deal with head stuff. But heart stuff, the parent is checked out of the building. They are not available for that. Number 3, an overemphasis on independence. Do you, kiddo. Let me do me. Even if the kiddo is not at the age where they can understand how to do themselves. And I mean that in a good way. So it's, you go figure it out. I mean, mommy had to figure it out herself. And do you see how generational curses are actually just generational consequences to generational behavior that is caused by either generational healthiness or generational unhealthiness. We become what we've been exposed to consistently. what we were exposed to consistently became what we ended up being exposed to, because it was exposed to what we have witnessed consistently, and backwards and backwards and backwards like that. And so if you're an avoidant person, it is very likely that you have one or both of your parents are avoidants, which is never usually the case. It's usually one avoidant and an anxious person, but we'll talk about anxious attachment next week. One of your parents is an avoidant. You live in a family culture of avoidance. So you have an uncle who behaves like, let's say your mom is the avoidant one. Her brothers, her siblings, so your uncles and aunties are the same. Maybe one or two of them will be like the outliers. And in family cultures where the family culture is one that is more avoidant than not, usually the people that are not avoidant, they usually get the brunt of the abuse in those families, because they will be mocked for things like being solved, they are a baby, they are this one, because they are still a bit more emotionally connected to themselves. And the avoidants in the family don't like that. All right. So I haven't talked about this. I think we can bring this episode to a close. For now, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you for spending this time with me today. I cannot tell you how much I have come to enjoy doing these episodes. Setting them up, I hate setting them up. Once I get into it, and I'm so glad that I have you guys here with me. I hope that this show is touching lives. The ethos of my brand is hope, help, and healing. And everything I do, I want to be able to bring some measure of hope, help, and healing into the hearts and minds of people all over this world, but especially in Nigeria, because that's where I'm from. And I see that there's so much of the hardship that we face in this country. And I'm just going to say this before I go, is directly correlated to how mentally and emotionally impaired we are. And I think that if my generation and the generations coming after, if we can actually start to get to know ourselves properly and understand ourselves properly, we might be able to create a better, different country, a different experience where we actually care about one another. If we care about one another, there's certain things you just won't do, like stealing billions and billions of dollars while people can't eat 3 meals a day. You just won't do it, right? So anyways, before I get all meta on us, thank you so much for joining me. If you have a story that you would like to share, please write in. For now, piling up the stories, because I have decided to go deep into this topic of types or trauma. I think it is worth extrapolating on. I think it is worth going deep into, and one or two episodes won't cover it. So please send your stories. When I've exhausted this episode or this topic, we will start reading other people's stories again. And funnily enough, if I have a story that accurately represents the topic that we're talking about within this series, I will use that story for it. So please send in your stories. You already know where to go to. The email is bambazeled@gmail.com. Bambazeled is spelled BAMBAEZLED @gmail.com. Keep sending me your DMs. I enjoy reading them. And as I've promised, I will always keep your stuff confidential. I'm the only one that sees them, and I delete them once the episode is done. Okay? So you're safe with me. Okay, so you know what time it is? Sign off with me. We did it. In life, you can always do better or you can do worse. Let's try to find ourselves in the former more than we are in the latter. Stay safe out there in those relationship streets. Make sure that you are not bamboozling or being bamboozled by your bae. I will see you again in the next episode. And until then, please let love guide you always. Bye for now.